Hello again and welcome to my subscriber. I have another question. From start to finish, what does the timeline of a transmutation of a vice look like? And what is the science behind what's happening during the process? If possible, please take a specific real-life example. This is not an easy one, because to really answer it would take... First, you couldn't use just a video, you'd have to write whole books, and even that wouldn't be enough, because this task of vice transmutation is the task of, of a big part of life. To learn this, you'll have to be open, sensible to life, and learn with life, because life is a real teacher. You may want to stick to a methodology, and it will work until it doesn't. And it will necessarily stop working because you haven't acquired the adaptability and the consequent wisdom to deal with vices. Wisdom is what works the ennoblement of the soul. Sure, you need power for that. Willpower, discipline, love for sure, because it gives you the humility to learn from your methods and from life, most importantly. And of course you need to be grounded, and that's where you are connected to life. If you ground yourself in a method, a specific method, one method, you are not grounded, my friend. You are under the dominion of a new vice, which you call discipline. Surely discipline can also be a virtue. In any case, for instance, in Through the Soul Mirror to the Sphere of the Sun, a book I have published via Falcon Books Publishing, I give plenty of techniques of vice transmutation. The same with my course Magic, my ongoing course Magic and Mystical Introspection. Including, you have at the final level of each, at the end of each level of this course, you have tests you can make. You will test yourself against a certain vice, and by cultivating a certain virtue, using only the techniques taught in that level. All this level of complexity, of layering, technique upon technique, of doing the same thing, this is meant to teach you that you can indeed change your patterns. And you have proved to yourself that you can with one method and then the other and then the other. Eventually, you'll have a whole grammar of methods. But as you do, you realize you can speak this grammar and create your own language with it. This is wisdom. You have tapped into wisdom, and wisdom is the thing that is the key for the whole ennoblement of the soul. This must flow like the Tao, the center of magical equilibrium that is dynamic and adaptable to life. But regarding the soul mirror itself, a technique by Franz Bardon, and I believe most of you know it, but most fail to notice that it is mutable and flowing all the time. It is a game of chess in which you have the white pieces and the black pieces in the board, you change one piece and the equations of the whole board change with it. The same thing happens with the soul mirror. You work a trait, and because all traits are interconnected, then the possibilities change in the soul mirror. If you go to perseusarcaneacademy.com and in the blog section search for chess, you will likely see an article of mine that speaks of working the soul mirror and the ennoblement of the soul as a game of chess or similar. It is interesting to notice that games, and this has been studied, games can have a stronger hold on us than, for instance, drugs. But you can use the games for strategies against your addictions. This is something I did when I worked at a startup. You have to be a strategist, and it's a game. Games are engaging, so engage. And as you engage with this game of ennoblement, your engagement with your vices will diminish. This is one thing. Another thing is realizing that there are no vices, no natural born vices, so to speak. In terms of Platonism and Hermeticism, obviously, because Hermeticism is a form of Platonism. The emanations descend, rays of light coming from the archetypes, and if you have an elemental imbalance, when they pass through you, they are filtered and turned into distortions. That's where vices come from. So if you connect to the source, to the virtue, you will have an easier time changing the elemental imbalance. And as I suppose many of you may be training initiation into Hermetics and on the early stages, because that's where most people are, there are techniques given right at step 1. And you practice thought observation and one-pointed concentration. You can learn to observe trains of thought and apply it to a certain vice. So these are the thoughts connected to this vice. Because you have learned also one-pointed concentration and mastered it, you can concentrate upon the source virtue of this same vice. And as you practice both simultaneously, you will notice the thoughts connected to the vice that you are observing passively. So these are actually the thoughts of the vice in a way. They start changing and becoming more and more like the thoughts, or more and more in the image of the virtue. And the vice will become more and more like the virtue. Sure, there are all these other techniques like magical washing, and magical breathing is actually very powerful, or conscious eating. They are meant, however, and this must not pass without one's attention put on it. They are meant for you to engage with the ennoblement of the soul in the habits that you cannot avoid, like washing, eating, breathing. So integrate all these. This is basic. If you are a very advanced magician, you can work with the magical mirror and the soul mirrors simultaneously. There is also an article of mine at Perseus Arcane Academy dealing with this. And I think it's called Magical Soul Mirrors. You can search. Some very advanced adepts may even project fault into the mirror and dissolve it. And that's it. However, and speaking of personal examples, there are very hard cases. There are very easy cases as well. Let's say I have come to eat chocolate in the last few days and I don't want to eat chocolate anymore, and I decide not to eat chocolate. So the pattern changes because my gears start to turn another way. It was enough for me to decide it. This is not really advice. But say you have grown up with very abusive parents, abusive in all ways, psychologically and physically, creating humiliating situations, so on and so on. You grow up and you start to take care of yourself. Because the notion of being taken care of is one of abuse. When you take care of yourself, you will likely abuse yourself, and create a pattern of self-hate. Now this has grown with your character. You grew up with your parents thinking for you, it's natural, before you learn to think they are thinking for you. And this voice has become yours, or rather, it has become part of your personality. These cases are hard, and they require often that you be conscious of all of it, aware of all of it. And it will require the intervention of life itself. But you must be available when it comes. Why it is important to be aware. And that's also how the soul mirrors get into this. For instance, I had my first girlfriend committed suicide. It created in me a pattern of engaging with the opposite sex in ways in which I would be their savior, but also the sacrificed one. And this creates the pattern of, in time, of emotional drainage. To the point where eventually I was reading a book, wasn't thinking about any of it, but there came a big panic attack. My body thought it was going to die. Absolutely. It was a very strong episode, and I took it as an opportunity to program all my layers in this survival mode, death or life situation. I reprogrammed myself in all strata, and that was the end of that pattern. So you must be humble and take the opportunities and work with life. Again, another example, and this is it had to do with anxiety again. There was this thought my body had, or fight or flight instinct it had in it, in which the body was afraid of self-destruction, of death. by its own hand some way. This includes autoimmune diseases and so on. So it also created in me a pattern of insomnia. And one day I sat at my table, the dining table, prepared the tea, poured for two, and invited the plasmification of death. So I took a tea with death, and I asked death, why, what's going on? What do you need from me? And it actually was very soothing, and it actually needed me to relax. And it told me why, and I hadn't been able to reach those conclusions by myself, not without this projection. And this solved it. So often we think of the vices as enemies, but the real problem is the fear we have of them. That's what is creating the tension and the distortion. As soon as I took tea with what was leaving me anxious, we worked together to find harmony. Now, of course, I cannot give you a single timeline. The vices or virtues are so many. They create the plurality of experiences of life. Each one has its own timeline, and each person is or her own timeline. This is the kind of question that, if answered in a raw way, will lead to ignorance rather than wisdom. Some things can only be quantified when they are qualified.